Now here again is Lillian Daniel. Lillian, thank you so much for joining us and sharing that message.
Thank you.
You did a beautiful job of framing calling in terms of community, and I wonder if we could talk about that a little bit. I know in your book you discussed that. How can our faith community help us find our personal calling and the calling of the community itself?
This is a subject I love to talk about, is that churches need to remember that they are communities of calling and not just communities that call people into ordained ministry. Sometimes we have too small a definition and forget that when a community of faith is healthy, people are constantly questioning, how am I living my life? Is it worthy of the calling that God has placed with me? And that's a sign to me, a marker of a healthy church, is when you have people asking those questions all the time.
And you were wrestling with your own call to ministry, Lillian.
Yeah.
Tell us about that bumpy road on toward a more abundant life you talk about.
Well, I did struggle with my own call to ministry for a number of reasons. Partly, as a young woman, I had never laid eyes on a woman minister in my life. So when I went to divinity school, I was sort of operating on the hunch they existed, but I had no proof until I got there. And again, you look out there and you think, oh, do I look like my own stereotype of a minister? And I pictured, you know, a man with gray hair and a beard and a deep voice and thought, this can't be what I'm meant to do. But I really became convinced along the way that God calls us exactly the way we are, and we don't have to pretend to be something different.
But now you were working with at-risk teens in Washington, D.C., and you were employed by U.S. News and World Report.
Yeah.
Your father was a journalist in Vietnam, and you traveled widely. And yet you say the church was that one constant anchor for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. By the way, I was also playing in a band, and I broke the band up when I went to divinity school.
Well, I wonder, do your parishioners know you once played the bass guitar in a band?
Well, yes, they are aware of that, but I kept it under wraps for the first couple of years. But yes, part of what I explain all those interests to, though, is a healthy life of faith, a family and a communities of faith along the way that encourage me to dream and to not be locked into stereotypes or that life that is just too small.
Speaking of family, you made a wonderful point, I think, about children and pushing our children towards a calling too early. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Because I know that's a real challenge for parents today.
Boy, it really is, as the world seems to get more competitive, and I really worry when I see young people who are so gifted in so many areas picking their calling based on the likelihood they'll achieve it, playing it too safe. And a lot of it comes from the parents, but a lot of it is just the society in general. And again, I think that's where church might take a young person who is on one path and pull them into another venue, like music can be that arena of exploring an entirely different calling in your life. And so I love that way in which the church is almost countercultural and revolutionary, underground in this pressure to do just one thing.
You have a compelling piece in the January 9th, 2007 issue of the Christian Century magazine called Secret Passage, and it touches, well, you set it up. You're performing a wedding, and the groom used to run wild through the secret passage in the church.
Yes, we're always down in the Pilgrim Hall, and every church has a dingy basement Pilgrim Hall, and that's where you wait on the day that you're going to be married and your best. And the young men and women I will be with down there will always say, you know, in youth fellowship we used to run wild in this place. As if I don't know, right? And they would sneak through the secret passage that led in the church, and they tell me these stories as though I'll be shocked. And then I get to tell them that in the moment before they get married, we're going to walk through that very secret passage where who knows what mischief they got into when they were in high school. And that's where they're going to step out the door into the front of the church and make their promises.
And where their future, though, looking through that peephole is yet blurred.
Yeah.
Now I look through a glass dark. Calvin and Abigail are your two children.
Yes,
now,
they
have
are.
they discovered that secret passage?
They have discovered that secret passage, and like all the children in the church, they point it out to me as though I have no idea it exists. You know, everyone assumes the pastor is clueless. So, like all pastors' kids, they feel like they own the church.
Now, you made a wonderful point in your message, too, about the gate as an analogy. How can we better find our own gates? What's stopping us from reaching our calling or being more in tune with that, do you think?
Well, I mean, the genius of biblical imagery is so enormous, but to me the gate is such a powerful image because it flows both ways. So sometimes the gate is a barrier, and sometimes the gate is what shows us the path we're meant to go in. And so I actually think that when people are stuck vocationally or stuck in a period of calling, that's a very rich moment of being in the gate, because the thing that appears to be blocking us is actually perhaps the thing that if we push through is going to be exactly the path. So it's a very rich time for practices of prayer and discernment and things like that.
Lillian, break down for us the difference between calling and career.
Oh, sure. Some of us are blessed to have a Venn diagram where the two overlap. And I feel like in the ministry, and I imagine what you do makes you feel that way too, career and calling come together, but not even in the ministry all the time. We all have work that we do to support our families and to earn an income. And then we have that God-given passion within us where that passion meets the needs of the world in some way. And I'm so aware that for so many Americans, work and calling do not go together. And you've got people working 3 part-time jobs and trying to make ends meet. And so we can't assume that they're always going to go together. But when we have those moments where we can express our calling in our work, it is such a blessing.
What's the formula, and what was it for you, to make one's work an extension of one's faith? I mean, to carry that sense of faith into one's own job or vocation.
Well, I think for some of us, we can't imagine not doing that thing. And so we're willing to make an economic sacrifice or to go to school or do those things to make it happen. You just cannot imagine doing anything else. And yet, even for me in the ministry, I have to be honest and say there are elements of the ministry that are clearly my calling, and there are parts of it that are onerous and just hard work. You know, sitting through lengthy meetings about roof repair, you know, come to mind. And yet in the preaching moment, I feel like I'm in my calling. So we all have that trade-off and that balance.
Yeah, I was going to say, in the minute we have left, do you want to share with us an inspirational nugget from your book, Tell It Like It Is, that showed the transformation of your community coming together by that dialogue that you created?
Sure. I'm passionate about recovering the practice of testimony, where lay people share and talk about their faith in worship, so that you're not just listening to the pastor, but hearing people tell real stories of their own callings and how God has moved in their lives. And I found that when you do that, the church explodes. It's very exciting.
And the word presence is so important and incarnational in that sense.
Right.
You know, we have a minute left, and I want to get back to your children and how we can convey the sense of faith as you're doing at the First Congregational Church of Glen Ellen in Illinois. How are you talking to Calvin and Abigail about the Christian faith?
Well, first we have to talk, period, to them about it. Not just people who are ministers talking to their children, but all of us have to carry that vocation into our parenting and into our mentoring of young people. Part of it goes back to a reluctance to talk about faith in general, I think, in a lot of our churches. So we have to break through that. Children are enormously interested in what we believe. What do you really think about heaven? What do you really think about calling? And pushing through that and just saying it is so important.
And service to others.
And service
They
to others.
learn that in Sunday school, I'll bet.
Thank you,
Thank
Lillian.
you, Lillian.